Vi dunkar ut ett extrainsatt avsnitt av podden Kent, detta med anledning av att podden Back to the Music with Ingrid vid midnatt skickade ut inte mindre än 2 timmars intervju med Joakim Berg himself. En otrolig utklassning mot alla oss som försöker få med profilstarka gäster i våra poddar om Kent. Och jag måste säga, vi ska snart prata med Sarah Snavely som är programledare för podden, att det här var riktigt bra. Några huvudpoänger först innan vi börjar. För det första, Joakim Berg som i många intervjusituationer kan ses som ganska svår att intervjua. Han kan framstå som lite stel, hela bandet kan göra det och kanske till och med i vissa lägen lite osköna. Men här är han en annan, en riktigt härlig och trevlig människa. Jag kan verkligen tycka att Snavelys intervjuer med Joakim Berg, det här är ju inte första gången, bildar ett nytt intryck av människan Joakim Berg till det positiva. Så lyssna på den. Det var väl värt att investera 2 timmar i. Några poänger att ta med sig. Han pratar om varför bandet gör den här återföreningen. Han pratar om att bandet inte bröt några löften när de beslutade för att återkomma. Han pratar om låtar, texter. Han ger specifika detaljer kring spelningarna. Till exempel att han just nu, eller intervjun gjordes i början av februari, tycker om Var är vi nu? Och då hoppas ju jag att det är en indikation på att den kommer under konserterna. Och så säger han hur många låtar bandet kommer köra per konsert. Spännande, jäkligt spännande. Nu pratar vi med Sarah Snavely, programledare för podden Back to the Music with Ingrid. A 2-hour-long interview with Joakim Berg, known for being quite shy in media. How did this happen?
Yeah, it's funny because, I don't know him, from anybody. And being American, didn't really know much about Kent. So to me, he was just a person who wasn't very shy. I mean, I kind of had to shut it down after 2 hours thinking, we could go on for hours. And he jokes when we're done, like, let's do this again. We could do this again. So he, how did it happen? I mean, we had interviewed him a year ago. We did another long episode and split it into 2. And it was the first interview he'd done in a long time. And it came about because Bjorn and him work together often, writing as songwriters and producers, and they're friends. And Bjorn asked him to come in and he said, yeah. And we didn't know that he didn't do interviews until I was sitting with him before the interview and was like, oh, how do you feel about this? And he's like, I'm kind of nervous. I don't do interviews. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to get the goods out of you then, man. And I think he really enjoyed that conversation because, as he said to me, when I bumped into him at a record release party in January of this year, he said, can we do that thing again? You don't ask boring questions like journalists do.
Oh my God.
Which were his exact words, actually. He's like, they all ask the same stuff. And I don't want to talk about that. I mean, if I'm to be honest here, he's like, I don't want to talk about that stuff. I just want to have a conversation about really what's going on here. And I think that's kind of my thing, is to take away this whole veneer about fame and success and just meet the person. And I think that's what he appreciated. So we just have a chat, because I just see him as a person, not as this concept. And I think when you are that big and so much stuff is said about you, it gets really irritating to be constantly met as that. So that to me was just, I sat down with a person and had a conversation and asked him stuff that I think he actually wanted to tell people really what's going on. But when people are just asking the same sort of questions, he never gets to it. So that was my impression of how it came about, that he actually did want to talk. He did want to tell things.
It sure sounds like it. You don't even have to ask for an interview. He asks you for an interview.
Yeah, I mean, because Anna Ternheim's a good friend of mine, and she was having a record release party that I went to, and he co-produced the album. So I was just about to leave and went to say goodbye to her, and there he was. And I was like, oh, I recognize you. And he was like, yeah, how's it going? And first thing he said was, when are we going to do that thing again? And I was like, all right, like, cool, let's do it. And he was like, just get in touch. So, and then I went home and told my partner, and he was like, oh yeah, Kent are playing like 6 shows soon. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it might sound stupid, but I know who Kent are, but I'm not a huge fan. So it was like, okay, cool, they're playing shows. And then it was like, wow, 6 sold out arena shows. And maybe because I wasn't so hyped about him that he wanted to do it. People just want to be people, I
Yeah.
think.
Hmm.
So,
But it really sounds like it. It sounds because when I hear Joakim Berg or the other guys in Kent when they are in those big shows with which they have been talk shows earlier, um, it's not that much fun actually. But when I hear him with you, he sounds so relaxed, and it just sounds like you guys are having a great conversation.
yeah, I mean, we're just sitting in the studio having a chat, and then, Hans, the technician, just presses record, and it just is that energy because I don't have any agenda of things that I need to get out to sell numbers or headlines or anything. I mean, and I think that in these times too, people want more authenticity, I have to say. And just access to the real person. And after interviewing him twice now, my impression is he's just like a real person that just wants to be perceived as a real person. And makes music because he absolutely loves making music and wants to connect with people through that music. And then you become this thing. People make you into this thing. And he's just like, I'm a guy that writes some great songs. So that to me, he's like so unpretentious. He's so not rock star. And I've met a lot of fucking rock stars, and he's just really a nice guy who happens to like be extremely successful at what he does. That's really my impression of him. So, and really just wants the best. He's just a really nice person, and I felt it was really, really honored to be able to. It wasn't until after that interview then he said to me, every day I get like press requests to do interviews, and I've said no to everybody. And then I was like, wait, what are you saying to me? Like, this is the only one. But to not make it a big deal, kind of just to honor that he just wanted to have a real conversation. So, and maybe
Hmm.
the fact that it was in English, the fact that I'm not Swedish, the fact that he could get a little bit of distance from it, and come out of the bubble of the hype of it all, was nice for him,
Yeah,
I'm thinking.
and that was kind of the opposite when you talked about writing lyrics in English because you don't want that distance. He talked about
Mm.
it on the podcast. We're talking to Sarah Snavely, who's the host of Back to the Music with Ingrid. They have just published a 2 hour long episode with Joakim Berg. One of the major questions that you talked about was why this comeback was established. And to me, when I was listening, he talked about people around him getting older or even passing away. It almost sounds like it sounded like he was a little bit emotional about that.
Yeah, he was. I mean, I just turned 50 as well, and he's in his 50s. And I think you can't really get to this age without some hard stuff happening. And it gives you a whole different perspective on time. And I think he really said as he was saying, we get offers. Like, it's not like it never happens. I mean, people are asking us to play and do things, and it's always felt like, whatever. But then suddenly he felt like, wait, there isn't just forever. And maybe this is a last chance if we want to do this. That he really was sitting with it. It's things look different in your 50s from your 20s, and
Yeah.
I mean, emotional. I can say he's an emotional person. We all are, but he's quite close to that. I mean, he's not afraid, in my mind, of expressing that he has emotions, and I think that's what makes him such a powerful lyricist as well. I think that's why he's so successful. And he even says that is like, what's the point in writing lyrics if I'm not going to hit the nerve? What's the point of any of this? So he really was like, what's the point of doing these shows if they don't actually mean something to me and to everybody? So that it was like, this is potentially our last chance to do this. We can't just assume that we've got all the time in the world. So
Uh, I think that a lot of the newspapers and the press afterwards also talked about what he said to those fans that the fans that might have been angry that they said goodbye once, and he said something about that they did not they did not make such a promise or something like that. To me as a fan, that was kind of a play with words, more or less. I think that he said in the press release was no more records, no more touring. And yeah, okay, there's no more records, and if you place all of the touring in one arena, I guess it's not a tour. So I think, okay, it will stick in court probably, you know.
yeah, I think he said something along the lines, and maybe it was off the recording, but that, I mean, what is forever, kind of, and I mean, things change, and that, yeah, he made it clear that they weren't getting back together, and they weren't going to make, records, and they weren't going to play, they weren't going to go on tours, but that, like, as a human, you kind of have the right to change your mind, and a lot of people make like really strict rules when you're in that position. Like, you got to say something and mean it because you're a god, essentially. And I think that's what he was like, fuck this, I'm not a god, I'm a person who said something, and now we're like, you know what, let's play some shows. And that he's like, do I not have that right? I mean, who am I harming? And that he understood that people were upset, but he was also like, I mean, kind of get over it. I mean, we're going to do this a little bit. And if you're really pissed off, then don't come. But like, we have the right to change our minds, or I mean, in his mind, he hadn't made some like hard, we're never, ever, ever playing again, and I'm signing on this dotted line. Then they never made that promise in his mind.
You should really listen to the podcast. Back to the Music with Ingrid. I really enjoyed it. It was especially I enjoyed the part where you talked about lyrics, and he could choose a song that he really liked at the moment. He could choose songs for each of the band member, which was really really funny, and almost a promise to us fans that they are going to play Var är vi nu, which is a favorite, especially of mine. So, and also you're also not afraid of asking those hard questions. You asked how many songs are you gonna play?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you call it a hard question. And I think this is the thing that, like, I was looking at Bjorn at points, and he's like, I can't believe you're asking that. But I'm like, we're people. Like, if you're a person, I could really just approached him as a friend. Like, if I bump into him and be like, oh, you're playing a gig, how many songs? I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a hard, and that's where I get a little like confused, and I think he does too, of like, why is that a hard song, or a hard question? And when I interviewed him the year before, I said to him, so will you guys ever play live again? And Bjorn's like, oh my God, I can't believe you asked. I'm like, I mean, everyone's wondering. He can say to me, I don't want to answer that. So to me, I think that the tiptoeing thing he wasn't into, and I don't tiptoe. I'm like, I
No.
have the right to ask. He has the right to not answer. And go ahead and ask, let's and find the truth from the person rather than hearsay, which we live in an era of hearsay.
Mm.
And why not just ask the person and get it right from them, and see really what they mean instead of all these stories being written. That's my take.
Back to the Music with Ingrid podcast, which can be found where podcasts can be found. A big thank you for joining Podden Kent.
Yes, and huge luck to you with this pod. I think it's fantastic that you're digging deep and nerding out. I think the world needs more of that. People that really love what they're doing and just go for it. So huge luck to you.